mid-'80s, so we're off the we're right on the coattails of Back to the Future and Marty McFly riding a skateboard around holding on it. And I know that we thought, hey, this is like we're gonna have a skateboard, but yeah, like this, we're on the ice. And so like we would do that. I remember hooking onto the UPS truck and them realizing that we were on there and fishtailing us. Yeah. Now people are like, dude, he's making this stuff up. No, this is how we grew up. And I don't know it was unique to Boise or to Idaho. I know they probably weren't doing this in Detroit necessarily.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and do intros.
Okay.
I am so glad to have my long-term friend Casey Hobson with us today.
Well, thanks, Cameron.
How long have we known each other? Because we're old now.
So I turned 50 in April. And we've known each other since I moved out here from Georgia in the second grade.
Okay.
So that was 7 years old. You were probably 6.
I was.
So, yeah, whatever the math on 49 minus 7 comes out to be.
Wow.
42 years?
Yeah. 43 years, 4 decades.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about it, but we grew up in probably the most ideal circumstance with the most ideal type of kids. I wish my kids had the group that we grew up with.
Yeah. Like I look at what some of my kids have gone through and their experience has been going through high school and stuff. And in fact, Brian Bird comes to church at our building and everything. And I remember we were talking about stuff in church one day. And I said, look, the difference between the way my kids grew up and the way I grew up is that I had Brian Bird. And my kids didn't, you know. And what I meant by that was like, it's friend groups, right?
Yeah.
And it's, you grow up, if you can grow up inside not a cocoon, because I don't think that you should be sheltered from the world, but sure. in a cocoon that supports you, that where you all have the same type of beliefs and the same values, then the rising tide raises all ships, right?
Right.
It kind of helps you along the way. But to be the lone man on the island, so to speak,
yeah,
boy, I think it's a family model. So yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it was a stellar way to grow up.
Yeah. When so I was talking to my kids. So Hyatt actually ended up with an amazing friend group.
Yeah.
His last year, the older kids, because we were moving around so much, they would have friend groups, but then we would move on them. And, so Elizabeth, her friend group, we ended up moving away. So she went off to college and just established her own thing.
Yeah.
But Hannah and Mary, they came here and then, so disruptive. And yet it kind of also built the resilience and taught them how to engage with new people. So I can see the argument for someone else to say, well, that's neat that you guys had that stellar, amazing friend group growing up, where the worst thing that happened maybe was someone taking a leak where they shouldn't. But
wow, you talk about that like that was a regular occurrence.
Hey, just saying, the wood pile is much more convenient than headed all the way home.
So I mean, not to totally sidetrack us, but my wife's family's from Salt Lake City, and like they're city slickers. They don't realize they're city slickers, but they're city slickers. And you and I, we grew up here in Boise, so we weren't Idaho Falls, we weren't Gooding, we weren't Burley, Rupert, these farm ag communities. But growing up here in Boise, it was still a very much farm mentality state.
It was.
Like Boise back then wasn't what Boise is now, with a major metropolitan area and all that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
And so we grew up very country, and like, this is what everybody's tuning in to hear, right? We had our one friend, and I don't necessarily want to name names, but he used to walk past his bathroom out his back door to go pee outside. And like, this is so commonplace. Like, you talk to anybody who grew up here, like, yeah, peeing outside is like, I'm going outside to pee. And it's as redneck as it gets, right?
Yeah.
But like my wife's side of the family and stuff, and probably a lot of people listening to this can't figure out, they can't fathom, you go outside to pee? But like that was the way we grew up. Is like, not why are we going to stop playing?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we going to time out because I got to go potty?
Yeah.
Bases are loaded in the wiffle ball game or in the middle of the basketball game or whatever. It's like there's a wood pile right over there.
That's right.
Oh, so yeah,
That's so fun because my kids, they're going to be horrified that I'm talking about this, but we have 2 bathrooms, 8 kids,
yeah,
5 girls plus my wife. So that's 6 gals
yeah.
in the house. There's a good chance that when a dude needs to use the bathroom, it's occupied.
I think God equipped us to be able to take care of matters in unique ways.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm grateful because it is so pleasant to not have to get uncomfortable, to just be able to take care of business somewhere else or into a container.
Yeah. Now, the problem we're going to have now is one of my neighbors is going to get a hold of this somehow, some way and go, oh my gosh, is he still doing this?
That's hilarious. Well, my kids, when they're like, hey, can I, we can hear them. I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be done in a minute. And they wait too long, right?
Yeah.
And so then you hear this do 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 slam. And it's like, I know what's going on. Okay. But I did have to go out and I discovered where they were using the facilities that are outside.
Yeah.
I was like, no, apparently I did teach proper. Yeah. Taking a leak outside. You gotta, number one, don't ever do it in the walkway, right? Or someone's going to naturally walk. And go find something to pee on and make sure that it's not going to be where because
Find a weed.
Yeah.
Make use of it.
Someone should be able to see you when you're doing it. That's the ideal. Anyway, so I did have to instruct them on proper outside urination etiquette. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. But for us, it was not a big deal. And in fact, it didn't occur to me that it wasn't normal. And so I was at my cousin's house, and this was in St. George, and we were going on a hike, and we were probably, I'm not a hiker. I never was a hiker. I'm much more of a hiker now than I was when I was a kid. Yeah. But I'm headed up this hill, and I was like, man, I got to go. So I just stepped off the trail and relieved myself. And I got back on the trail and started walking up, and they were looking at me like I was like, what? How obscene is that? That was horrible. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Yeah, all the time. Yeah. Not a big deal. Yeah. So I think little micro cultures as well, because if my parents knew how much we peed outside, they probably would have been like, no.
But that's a key ingredient. Yeah. Like, we didn't have helicopter parents back then. No. So like, I think that was, I don't want to say it was the least of their concerns, but it wasn't at all a concern. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that wasn't a concern.
That's true.
And it wasn't that they didn't care about us. It's that Boise growing up was a place where you could allow your kids to still go and be. I mean, think about all the hours that we were on bicycles, all the hours that we were just out and about.
Going from one friend's house to another.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom didn't know where we were at any given moment. She knew we were out playing. She wasn't, she wasn't back in the bedroom passed out or something.
Right.
But we had that liberty to go play. And she could whistle like nobody's business. Best whistler I've ever heard. She would go out on the front porch when it was dinner time or whatever, and that was the dinner bell. She would just, and I, to this day, don't know how she does that. But we could hear it for a block away. Like, oh, crap, mom's calling, And we'd come from whatever direction that we were at. And, but they weren't, I don't think they were concerned about, I know, man, Casey and his friends are out peeing in the backyard again because, that was just whatever. They're boys being boys.
That's right.
Now, maybe if there were girls in the family, I didn't have any sisters. Maybe if there were girls in the family, it would have been a completely different dynamic. You didn't have sisters.
I didn't have sisters.
So, I know that, when I got married, my dad had to change some of his habits and stuff.
Okay.
Because suddenly there was a daughter in the house.
Right.
So sitting around in his underwear was not acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
I
know what you're talking about.
So maybe it wasn't so much growing up Idaho. Maybe it was growing up sisterless. I don't know.
That's interesting. It would be fun to get Chad and Danny on. Yeah. Just see what their perspectives were. Because You're right. When I got married, I was the first one married in my family, and it was odd the amount of change my dad did in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, what? Okay, that makes sense. I didn't think about that because had just grown up used to uh, the uh, the dress code inside the home was very relaxed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's not. And one of the cool things I would have never ever guessed, but my dad was amazing at buying my wife clothes.
Really?
Yeah. So for Christmas, so we were married in November. For Christmas, he gave her this beautiful dress, and I see my wife and I was like, "Holy cow!" I would have never picked that for her, but it was flattering. It fit, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome. And he goes, "Oh, she's easy to shop for." I was like, "Okay." And so next holiday, more or birthday, whatever, more gifts. And then Brian got married and Eric got married, and the gifts stopped. And I was like, "Hey, so how come you stopped buying Sarah clothes? Because you were really good at it." And he's like, "Oh, I couldn't figure out how to get the clothes for the others. They're not as easy to shop for."
Oh, interesting.
I was like, lame. So if my brothers had stayed single, my wife would have had a complete set of clothes every year.
Yes.
It was odd.
Yeah.
The chances of
Well,
that.
he may have been one, he'd never had a girl.
That's
Clearly did. And I will tell you that, so we have, my two oldest are my boys, then my youngest is my girl. And she's 10 now. And Kohl's is going out of business over at the Boise Town Square Mall. And so I went in just the other day on my lunch break, and I was looking for, okay, what can I buy that's on clearance?
Yeah.
Jeans for my job, whatever. Well, all my stuff was picked over, so you start looking for the kids. And I will tell you, it's a lot more fun to shop for Paige than it is for Bo or Catcher because, well, I don't know why. It's just different. You're shopping for your little girl. And you can say, oh, like she would look cute with those red shoes on. She would, with the boys, it's like, I don't know. Like
They're going to run it anyway.
They're going to look like moronic boys either way,
Oh, that reminds me of the quote that you can take an awkward girl as a teenager, get her in a fancy dress, a little bit of makeup, and she can be gorgeous. You take a guy, no matter what you do, you're going to just make an awkward young man in a suit.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's always going to be weird. So,
and Seinfeld has a good bit about that. It talks about the best man and everybody dresses in the tuxedos. And he says, basically the idea is that men are all the same anyway. They can be irreplaceable. They can just plug and play. That's why we dress them all the same in the tuxedo. That's why in the wedding ceremony, it's not, do you take Cameron Watson? It's, do you take this man? Because if you don't show, the next one just slides over and boom. Oh, and so the ceremony awesome. Continues. He's got a good bit about that.
Man, comedians, I have decided, have to be the most intelligent, off the cuff people. Yeah. And I know it's not off the cuff. I know they practice their art.
Yeah.
But the amount of knowledge they have to have in order to pick a point and have it resonate, it's amazing the genius that goes behind some of their bits.
Oh, yeah. Well, quick in recognizing, quick in being able to deliver, and I think there's a talent that gets refined there. Because we've all been around in the gab sessions before and stuff. You're like, ooh, and like your eyes get wide and the light bulb goes off because like you've got the perfect reaction to that comment that was just set, and you trip all over trying to get it out in time.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think they got to be patient. They got to be quick, but they got to, I think your mind sometimes goes 10,000 times faster than your tongue can keep up with. Yeah. So it's pacing themselves and just knowing that, hey, I got the time. Let me deliver this perfectly, and wham,
Yeah.
But yeah, sharp, witty.
My perception was that you guys were, your family was exposed to comedy far more than my family. Like, you guys would joke, and have little riffs, and I would look and I couldn't I couldn't figure out how you guys did that, you know?
Yeah.
You were entertaining. In fact, it was your vehicle. If we were going to go camping, I wanted to be in your guys' vehicle because it was going to be so funny and fun.
Yeah.
And it's I wonder if there was your family was just naturally wit inclined, or
I don't know. I think that there's coping mechanisms that everybody develops. I think that there's, like some families are really easy with their emotions, are very expressive and stuff like that. Other families are uncomfortable with that. And so they turn to laughter. Maybe that's what we did. I don't know. I mean, well, at the same time, we were not afraid to tell each other we loved each other, like most of the time, to this day, even. Well, I'll backtrack on that a little bit. My brother and I don't do that as much anymore because I know it makes him uncomfortable. But if we're talking
fun just to do it. Hey, Josh,
it was for a while, but I think it's old. It's like, okay,
my undying devotion is your brother.
You end the conversation with, all right, good talking to you, love you, and he pauses like, yeah, love you too, and but we always, that was common to express that. Leaving the house or whatever. So we had that side to us, but I think more than anything, we were defensive with humor, and we were, that was just kind of our go-to I don't know if we were masking emotions and feelings, or if we were using humor to convey feelings. I know that we did a lot more yelling than a lot of families. My wife to this day will not play pinochle with anybody because the first time she tried to learn the game, my dad, well, she says he yelled. I think he communicated.
Right.
That's how we did it. And not to make excuses for dad, but she's like, no, that's a violent, horrible game. And all y'all do is yell. And I said, no, we communicate. We talk about things. And that was kind of across the board. So I don't know, maybe humor balanced that. I don't know, but the reality was we probably weren't comfortable in our own skin. So instead of being sappy or risk emotion, putting it out there, it was a joke instead. I don't know.
Yeah. I think out of our friend group, Danny had the best one-liners. I remember him going through a book one time, and, he got to the fat section and just let go. And I was just like, dude, leave me alone for a bit. Let me catch my breath.
Come up for air.
Because it was so funny. It was directed at me, but it was so funny. Like the beach whale one, hey.
I don't know that. I don't remember that.
Cameron, make sure when you go to the beach, make sure you take a friend along so that if they can prevent the people from throwing you back in the ocean yelling, beach whale, beach whale. And it was a little bit of extra because I don't think the book said take a friend along.
Probably, he probably adapted it.
Yeah.
No, they were good that way. He and Carrie both were, and so like they were the kings of sarcasm.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted sarcastic humor, all right, put them in the room with you. And boy, you look back on it, and I'm sure that nothing is perfectly remembered. Usually you don't have 100% clarity in your recollection, but I think they lived more for being able to deliver the zinger, the sarcastic zinger, than to add the meat and potatoes of the conversation,
I could see that. That's interesting. And that kind of fit a lot of the joy that you would see afterwards.
Yeah.
Because when he would deliver, it goes back to that, if light bulb, I got it, but he could actually get it out.
Yeah.
And it perfectly timed. And you're like, how? You look over at him, he's just grinning. He knew exactly what he did.
And it depends on who the target was.
Yeah.
But there were times where I can remember being the target and you just left one to beat the snot out.
Yeah.
Like, dude, what's wrong with you? Why are you so crabby? And, you just, Teddy was making fun of me or, whatever it was. But it was like, it rubbed you wrong for the majority of the day. Like, man, why were we going to pick on Chad or Cameron or, like, why was I the target today? But yeah.
I wonder what his perception was, because I bet you he lives just down the road here.
Yeah, I was noticing that when I pulled up. Yeah, I was like, I think Danny lives right around here.
Yeah. So I see him from time to time. And, in our adulthood, we obviously put away childish things. So
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard him do a zinger or a one liner as an adult with kids.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. But looking back, some of the funniest things, whether it was directed at me or someone else, and I feel a little guilty because I did prefer it being directed at someone else.
Well, that's natural.
Yeah.
You want to direct it at someone else.
But it was so funny.
Yeah.
My kids, I've been doing a lot of retrospection because now my family's kind of split in half now. So I have 18 to 25, or she was 19 to 25, four oldest, service mission, three married.
Okay.
And then I have two high schoolers and two elementary schoolers. And I'm been looking back and looking at the mistakes I made with the oldest and reading books and learning. And I remember having a conversation about roughhousing, and roughhousing, I hated it growing up because I was always, my limbs were longer than my muscles could sustain. That's,
Yeah.
I was clumsy, in other words. And roughhousing would hurt, and I couldn't defend myself, and I hated it. So growing up, I didn't allow any roughhousing. No, none.
Yeah.
And then I'm reading books about how important it is to roughhouse. And I'm like, gosh, shoot, did I miss something here?
Yeah.
I protected the oldest four from roughhousing. But the nice thing is it was three girls and a guy. And so I have a son who's extraordinarily sensitive
Yeah.
to the needs of others and will protect women. Like,
Yeah.
I watched him one time, and it was one of the first times I got a little nervous on behalf of my kids because I was like, he is about to get beat up. He's stepping in where this is not his thing. And then I realized, oh, he's my son. He's huge. He's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But it was weird to watch him do that. And so now with my youngest two boys, I don't know where the line is for roughhousing. And I still don't know. I'm still wondering.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be as quick to say, hey, we don't roughhouse. Where for the oldest ones, when they would start, if they started to swing pillows at each other, I'd be like,
Yeah.
play something else.
Yeah.
Now I think I might encourage them to get some pillows out and, go to town.
I've got a cousin who's like a sister to me, closest single sister I ever had. And I was over visiting her in Idaho Falls one time, and she has four different boys, and they were kind of picking at each other, and they're the most behaved kids you've ever seen. So like, gotta throw that out there but they're kind of picking at each other, ribbing each other, and their dad, her husband, says, "All right, go get the boxing gloves," and made them put them on, and then it turned into a boxing match right there in the living room.
Seriously.
I was like, and we grew up very redneck. Like, and people assume, well, that's because your mom's from North Carolina and that was your heritage and stuff. And like, no, like most of the redneck stuff we got from living out here. And so I remember watching this going, oh my gosh, they're going to like, the 16-year-olds are going to kill the 8-year-old type of thing. And I wasn't horrified, but I was mesmerized because, but when they were done, it was like, all right, so you got it out of your system. Now, now go off and play well together, or whatever the lesson was.
So they're boxing, big age difference. And
Oh yeah, like there's four of them, so I think it ranged at the time 16, 14, 12, and then I think the last one dropped down from 12 to 8 or something like that, And so, yeah.
Did you ever do the dirt clod fights with us? I don't remember you being part of that.
We were too sophisticated for that.
Yeah.
And as I claimed to have grown up redneck and then claim the sophistication there. No, I don't remember that. No.
I think that was a different set of friends, and
Yeah.
it got nasty where we had boundaries. Like you could throw the dirt clod, but you had to stay on your side of the street. And oh my goodness, it got bad. So bad that Stephanie's dad, so on our street, this is when the Lakes lived further on down. I don't know if you remember that, but so I'm having a dirt clod fight with the Jensens across the street and a gal named Stephanie Vetter and this person, the neighbors next to us, and Stephanie catches one right in the face. Yeah, and dirt clods stay furt.
Well, they usually got some rock reinforcement in them.
They do. So she catches one in the face, starts crying, goes on inside, and we continue to play. And actually, I think we stopped playing at that point because we all went, oh, I don't think I want that to happen. So then we just gathered and we started playing. Well, her dad comes marching down the street and everybody just goes, pow, and disappears. And I'm the idiot who looks and goes, I wonder why he's so mad. And he comes up and he's like, your friends abandoned you. And I was like, what do you mean, my friends? Where are my friends? What? You're right. And he's like, you did this to my daughter. And we're like, actually, I know I didn't, because I can't throw that well. In my mind, I'm going through all of these logical, things. And he's just yelling. And when he was done, I remember going, yeah, I don't think I want to be like that. I don't ever want to yell at someone for doing that. And so I think that was one of the little turning points for me to decide that I wouldn't be the guy to raise my voice in order to handle conflict.
Yeah.
And it served me well, but as a dad, I had to practice raising my voice because sometimes that was needed to get the discipline going for the kids because they wouldn't know that they were in trouble. I'd be like, all right, so you did this wrong. And they're like, oh, okay. And then finally it's like, all right, so I'm going to yell, hey, you did this wrong. And they're, oh, and they feel it and then they can change.
Yeah.
I wonder where the balance is because I know I was pretty extreme. I look at other families that would vocalize. You said there was a lot of raised voices in your household. We couldn't be loud in our house because my dad worked nights.
Oh.
So when we would fight, we had to do it silently. So it was a lot of this. And then if someone yelled, the fight would be over. So if you wanted to risk the wrath of dad, you would just vocalize something that you were in pain. So if someone accidentally went too far, because the goal was never to kill each other.
Right.
I have a scar. Right. See this scar right there? The two.
Oh yeah.
That was a steak fork, 3-pronged steak fork thrown at me by my brother. Boop. And it hung.
Yeah.
I was like, huh. And then the blood came out. And I vocalized on that one.
Yeah.
Everyone ran because, my dad, if he got woke up, would come stomping out. And then that's where death was really at risk.
You guys we were learning combat in our households. You were learning psychological warfare because I could win this war without even firing a shot because I want to wake dad up and he's going to think that you hurt me and you're dead.
That's about right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting concept because, my wife would be the first to tell you that, well, you never have to yell. And I don't know that I believe that. And I don't know that there's a one size fits all.
That's true too.
I think it depends on the family. I think it depends on the kids. I think it depends on the DNA. My kids are half of my wife and half of me, right? Which means there's a half of them that very much is like in line and in that links to her soul, and she knows how to like message to them and how to raise them, right?
Yeah.
But there's another half, a completely different half, that is my DNA. And it doesn't move, doesn't twitch an ear unless is yelled at and threatened with their life type of thing.
Yeah.
What's the better half? Well, probably my wife's half, right? But I can't change the fact that the half of them is my DNA, so I got to speak to that half at times and say, you could better, I don't know if your podcast is G-rated or PG or PG-13, but, you better move your ass or else there's going to be some hell to pay, and feel free to bleep that out if you need to. But there's times where I think I've got some friends who have adopted kids,
Okay.
and they'll be the first to tell you it is weird because the ones that we've adopted, like there's DNA in there that is just going to send them in a direction, like even though they're in our home and in the environment and everything else, there's DNA in there that just doesn't line up the same as the kids who are our genetic kids.
Interesting. That
And
goes to that nurture versus nature.
yeah,
Discussion.
and it's like I think so that here's the challenge. Yeah, we've all done it, right? We've all been out in public and you see the mom scolding the kid or you see the dad flying off the handle and you're like, what a piece of crap. I would never. But yeah, be careful with that because you may be right. Like there's times where you're like, I'm gonna go over and smack the crap out of that dad because like what he's doing to that kid is, but there's also times where like that parent knows how to communicate to their kid, like just inherently, instinctively knows that.
So
And it's not a free pass. You don't
Okay.
get to be a jerk. You don't get to
Yes.
be like abusive. You don't get to do any of that. But I do believe instinctually, like my dad could talk to me and say things to me that were short and direct, but that would cut me to the core, not in a bad way, but like, yeah, okay.
affect change.
Yeah. And had my mom said those things, wouldn't have done any good, right? And if somebody would have come in and given me a 30-minute lecture about this, wouldn't have done nearly as good. But my dad coming in and saying, whatever it was that he said at any given time, it was like there was a direct conduit. And I've noticed I've got the same thing with my oldest. My second child is got some challenges. He's got cerebral palsy, so that's kind of a wild card in there. Like I don't have a manual on him.
Yeah.
I can't even begin to write one because it's all over the place. My daughter, the jury's still out, but like I do have a direct conduit to that kid.
Yeah. You know, one nice thing about having 8 kids
What?
is as you screw up with the older ones, you can learn for the younger one.
You see, that didn't work. That didn't work in our family because each kid has had to have their own manual written on the fly. The first one, and everybody, their first child is going to be that way.
Sure.
Because it's the first and you're figuring it out. You're like, oh, I don't know what to do. What do you think we ought to do? I don't know. Take this away. Yeah, let's give that a try. Then you make your notes and go, yeah, that didn't work. So child number 2, know that we got to do this and this and this, right? Well, the catcher having a cerebral palsy, everything in our manual that we were developing for Bo, and just so people don't realize we're actually writing a manual, but in your parent manual that you're developing, it's like, okay, none of this applies whatsoever. Whoosh, brand new manual for that kid.
Yeah.
And then Paige comes along and she's a girl. Well, there's no carryover parenting on her either. So like 3 kids, 3 distinct different manuals.
So if you'd had 6 or maybe 8, maybe you'd get a
Maybe there could be some copy and paste. Yeah.
Well, how did you find out about what was the first time you went, we might need to pursue finding out more about number 2?
With Catcher, it was my wife. She watched this. She's going to be like, yeah, Casey, when was it? When did she's going to watch this, see if I know. He had speech delays.
Okay.
And I think it was 18 months in, and we're not seeing any. There's certain kids are supposed to start and like talking, even though they're not talking, they're trying to it's that
paralanguage.
And Catcher wasn't doing any of that yet. And the doctor said, hey, he's a little behind in speech development. You might want to go in and see somebody. And we didn't think it was that big of a deal, to be honest with you. Liz had a brother who didn't talk until later, and then Josh, my brother, didn't talk forever. And then when he finally started talking, it was full sentences. It was just like, okay, I'm ready to talk now, type of thing. So, it wasn't alarms and stuff going off for us. But then at 2 years and even 2.5 years, I think it was about the 2.5 year mark, somewhere in between there, we're like, okay, we probably ought to go, just see.
Okay.
And he came back diagnosed mild cerebral palsy, which is good for him, good for us. Cerebral palsy is basically, and I'm going to offend people out there by describing it in such a
Oh, one of the
rudimentary.
commenters from the YouTube channel,
Yeah.
when we talked about being offended, had the best comment. I wish I should look at. I remember listening to a podcast when they're like, "Oh, and some commenter said it." I can't remember who it was. I was like, "Yeah, they should know who that is." Now I'm like, "Oh, I can't remember who it was." But some commenter out there said those who get offended are not good at understanding.
I
So-
agree with that. Like there's it takes a lot to offend me. Like you've got to get ruthless and just, all right, that was just plain me. You're trying to be a jerk now.
Right.
You know,
So
Anyway.
free reign here. Those who are offended, they need to understand better. So go ahead and be rudimentary in talking about it.
so cerebral palsy, as I understand it and how it's been explained to us, is basically brain damage.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't happen from a impact or something like that, but at some point during the birthing process or while he was in the womb or something, they figured that he had basically a little bit of a stroke.
Okay.
And as a result, it put scar tissue on the brain. Now, with a stroke victim, and again, what little bit I understand, because I've unfortunately never been one, you know, the one advantage a stroke victim has is like if they have to learn to walk again, if they have to learn to talk again and things like that, as horrible as that all is, they've done it before.
Okay.
So it's up there.
Yeah.
But the paths for that message to route from the brain to the extremities is now closed. Like there's a big barrier there. The bridge is out, whatever analogy you want to use. So the brain has to, just like on our GPS, when it says rerouting or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, the brain has to do that. It's like, okay, I know what I'm trying to launch here, but I can't send it this. And so you have to learn to send it a different way. And that's what all that therapy is and everything.
Gotcha.
Now, there's somebody at home right now going, dude, this guy's doesn't know what he's talking about.
And then someone else is like, "Oh, I finally understand."
Yeah. So, but with Catcher, he never had that. Nothing was ever learned. So the brain is just programmed like, hey, I got to send these signals off.
But it doesn't actually understand purpose or evidence of outcome.
Yeah.
So there's no reinforcement thing to. So I'm big into AI and neural networks, and I won't go into there, but there's a feedback part. No one talks about it because it's geeky, weird stuff. But
Right.
when you're trying to train a neural network, you have to be able to give it feedback on how well it did. If someone's already walked, they know what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're trying to move a leg and it's not moving, the brain's like, well, that didn't work. Let's do it.
Yeah.
If it's never happened before, it's just like, is that okay?
Yeah.
How do I know, did that work?
What's your control part of the experiment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and without a control part, then you're just firing stuff off. And the best I can understand the cerebral palsy is, you know, with Catcher, since he had it from birth, you know, the brain's just firing signals off, and the down part to that is if it learns to mediocrely, if that's obviously not a word, but
I like
it
that
in a mediocre way, if it learns how to get the job done, okay, that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
And so then later on, so you go through all kinds of therapy and all kinds of speech therapy, occupational therapy, different things like that, to try to relearn around what the brain thought at the time was, hey, cool, we got it done.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, this isn't so cool. We gotta, well, I don't know, because this is what we've figured out. You know, no, trust me, if you go this route. So anyway, we're fortunate. He's fortunate because it can be very debilitating, just depending on how bad that scar tissue was, right?
Right.
You know, you can have kids who are in a wheelchair their whole life, and they may be completely functional. Just again, where is that on the brain? And they could be completely functional intellectually, but have no use of the lower half of their body, or you know, no real control of any of this.
So it all depends on what part of the brain was affected by whenever and whatever it was that caused it.
Right.
So I didn't realize it was such a broad umbrella as far as the diagnosis goes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So his, they say is mild, like super mild. The blessings of that is that he still does a lot of stuff like a normal kid.
Okay.
The word you're supposed to use these days is typical,
Yeah.
but give it 10 more years and that'll be a taboo word. So
That's the cycle.
normal. But then there's other stuff like, he's 15. He can't tie his shoes, so he'll come up, hey, Dad, will you tie my shoes so I can go over to the gym and play basketball? Yeah. I'll do that for you.
Huh.
And so like the other kids, so bringing this full circle, like how did you grow up? It was great having the kids that we grew up and stuff. Well, the kids looked and like, what's this kid's problem?
Sure.
Like, hey, Biff, get a load of this guy's life jacket. Dork thinks he's going to drown. It's
Thank you, terrific.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
nice.
Kid can't tie his shoes. He can't, what it was. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's the double-edged sword, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a much better situation than it could be, but it also brings in his challenges and stuff.
Did you do you have any recollection of my inability to communicate growing up? Did you ever like go, wow, that kid can't speak?
Like when you say that, I think I remember it, but like it's not what I remember about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had 6 years of speech therapy, and it was bad, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, I didn't learn how to read, because how do you teach a kid to read? You put a book in front of them,
Right.
and you say, this is an apple. Say apple. And I'm like, and they're like, okay, moving on. So I just, didn't read until this one, my reading teacher in middle school, it was like the first teacher who came over and said, so you can identify these words, but you have no idea what you're reading, do you? And I'm like, no. Have you ever read a book? No. And she got me to read my first book.
Yeah.
And it was life-changing. She's like, hey, when you come to something you can't figure out how to read, or you don't know what it says, just keep going. You'll be able to figure it out by context. And so it changed my life. And by the way, I hated the idea of reading a book because none of them sounded interesting. So
Right.
she goes, what's your favorite show? What's a movie that you've enjoyed? I was like, well, I like The Rats of Nim. She goes, do you ever wonder what happened after? I was like, what? No? Wait, what happened after? She goes to her bookshelf, pulls off this book and says, this tells the story of what happens to them after the movie's over. And she gives it to me and she goes, there's going to be a lot in there you you can't read. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And I did. And it created a love of reading. So I owe that teacher a huge debt of gratitude, right? But that speech therapy made me so sensitive that with my oldest child, from when she was like barely gooing and guying, I was coaching her, having to do the mouth exercises.
Yeah.
And my family makes fun of me because there was a time she was 2, and she was really into this thing and wouldn't let it go. And so I stopped her and I said, Elizabeth, you're fixating. Can you say fixating? And she looks up at me and she goes, fixating, because I was constantly trying to get her to speak words. So she's talking like a champ. Great pronunciation. I can't even say pronunciation right.
It's all right.
She's saying all these things. Then number 2 comes along, and just a little delayed, I go in and I don't want her to have the same issues I had. So we have health and welfare person come in, a speech therapist, to evaluate her, and they're like, she's ahead. Like, how can she be ahead? She's so far behind. And they're like, yeah, your other daughter's obviously really, really advanced. Yeah. Like, oh, okay. But yeah, so now that fast forward, and that communication and that manual that doesn't come with each child, and each child's different.
Right.
Our 4th child, he was a really, really good kid. Everybody knew he was a good kid, but he was a kid and he was a boy, and he would do stupid things like boys do.
Yeah.
And one time in the middle of the night, he and his friend went around and started knocking on people's windows. And this is when we were living back where we grew up, in a subdivision called Charter Point.
Okay.
If you want to ask the sheriff where most of the issues in Ada County come from, what subdivision is one to avoid, that would be the...
Oh, really?
Yeah. And anyway, and I was like, you can't do that. And I'm talking to him and he's listening and he has flat effect. So no external indication of what he's feeling or what he's thinking.
Okay.
And he wasn't verbalizing what he's doing. And this, I don't know, he's maybe 10 years old. And so no effect. I'm like, oh, he doesn't get it yet. So then I start to talk about consequences. Still not getting it. I was like, you could have been shot. And I go into great description. All of a sudden, he goes pale. Passes
Really? Well, you got through.
I got through. And I got through. I got through enough that I knew that I had gotten through. So at that point, I was like, oh, so my inability to understand whether or not he understands is a limitation here, not him understanding me. But he actually, later on, he's gone through quite the life because he has a tendency for moral obsessive compulsive.
Okay.
So meaning that he feels like he has to be morally correct, and when he sins, it just cycles and it beats him up. And so when his cousin, who was just slightly older than committed suicide, now that moral OCD had a target, and suicide became a real possibility. And he had a couple notes, and it was horrible, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was his friend group, to kind of go back to where we started, playing a game that was like the start of him living again. And for a long time, our focus was preventing him from dying.
Yeah.
There was no effort in trying to get him to live. It was just, let's prevent him from dying. 5 hospitalizations. It was a really tough part of life. But they started playing this game called Senior Assassin. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, you get a group together. Everybody is given a target.
And this is the seniors in high school, the graduating class.
Yeah. So, and he wasn't a senior. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he wasn't a senior.
Okay.
But they were like, hey, we're going to open this up. And the token they had, I think, were spoons. So you could get your target out by touching them with a spoon.
Okay.
And the idea is, if I was your target, you could touch me with your spoon, I would be out, and then you would assume and take on my target until there's one left.
Right.
So he's playing this.
So you never know at any given time who's after you.
That's right. And so he has this group. They're creative, and I'm watching him. And up until that point, it was life-threatening depression, spike of just bad depression, back down to life-threatening depression. And then he started playing this game, and with all the other things going on, I mean, we were trying everything. I mean, if we did all the normal things that people do, then we started going into the world of wacky, and we were trying anything and everything. And then I noticed that things started getting where he wasn't just having bad depression, he was having mild depression. And that was like, yeah, and I'm talking to him in the car one day, and that's one thing he's always done, just totally willing to share exactly where he's at. How are you doing? Oh, I want to die. I just don't want to live anymore. Can you just please let me die? Can you help me just end my life? And, it's like, no.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I was like, things seem to be going well. What's occupying your thoughts here? And he's like, it's this game. And I was like, tell me more. And this group of friends pulled him back into living, gave him a purpose that what was neat about it is it wasn't life-threatening, that nothing mattered. It was a game. And it gave him an excuse to interact with people, doing absurd things like setting up a trap above someone's door so that when they walked out, he could pull a string and a spoon would fall and hit him.
Yeah.
Just bizarre, weird, fun things. And that connection with friends helped pull him back from just surviving into living again.
Yeah.
And I wonder if one of the issues that we never had, that our kids had, was isolation. we spent so much time at each other's homes in the backyards on those. I remember, do you remember the Cravens?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, one of their kids, I feel awful. I remember Sarah's name, but the older kid, he was a basketball player.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. This is terrible. But one day he's like, you like playing basketball? I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, you're not very good. He didn't say it like that. I was like, no, I'm not. He goes, if you want to get better, meet me here at Silver Sage Elementary. Meet me here after school and I'll coach you.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. He's a high schooler.
Sure.
Coaching some and so and he's like teaching me stuff that he had learned and helping me, and he didn't have to do that.
Yes.
He's a teenager helping some annoying elementary school student about to go into middle school who's clumsier than most people because I had these huge feet, kind of fat and not very, just weak, and he's all coaching me and helping me.
Yeah.
That was just the neighborhood we were in. Man, I remember a couple times getting into trouble, but it was such mild. I was like, oh wow, that was pretty bad. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, I would be excited if my kids would go do something like that and get into trouble.
Well, and I think not only was it the neighborhood, I think it was the community. I think it was Boise. I think it was Idaho.
Okay.
And
you think most have changed that much from culturally speaking?
I do. I certainly do. I think that's still Idaho in many areas. I don't know if it's still Boise.
Okay.
But I think it was Idaho. My mom, grew up in North Carolina, lived in Atlanta, was always very grateful that she moved her family out here to Idaho when we were so young, because she said, and still to this day says, it was a great place to raise kids.
Oh yeah.
And I think it goes because that was the environment that allowed us to do all that stuff. But I think 1,000%, you mentioned like the isolation, I think that the stupid phones, and this entire generation is the iPhone generation. And for as remarkable as that technology is, and we're using them right now for this podcast, and you've got the world of information at your fingertips. You can carry around everything from the Constitution at your fingertips to the scriptures at your fingertips, and anything that you want, but also all the filth that you can also carry around. But it's the glued and the brain rot that is right there in the palm of your hand. We didn't have that, So I look at my kids and their friends, and they'll sit in a room together and scroll through TikTok videos. And, I've never looked at TikTok. Couldn't tell you anything about TikTok. I've seen reels on Facebook and I've seen reels on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they can get addictive. It's like, oh man, that was cool. That ship went up this wave and came crashing down and all this thing. I'd never seen anything like that. And then the stupid, algorithm knows, oh, he liked this. Let me give him another one. I'm going to give him another one. And pretty soon you're 60 minutes, 2 hours later
watching Russian dash cam videos.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
So we had to go live life. We were on our bicycles. We were throwing dirt clods at each other. We were throwing, here's one for you. We used to hooky bob in our subdivision every winter time.
Yep.
And it was probably only 2 or 3 really good snow years that we had.
Yeah.
But to me, in my memory, that was our entire childhood.
Absolutely.
And we would go.
Strangers.
Yes.
You would hook onto the back of a car that slowed down at an intersection, grab on, and if they noticed, instead of being like, okay, they'd be like, oh yeah.
And it was like, I think we all, this is mid 80s, so we're off we're right on the coattails of Back to the Future and Marty McFly riding a skateboard around, holding on.
Right.
And I know that we thought, hey, we have a skateboard, but like this, we're on the ice. And so we would do that. I remember hooking onto the UPS truck, and them realizing that we were on there and fishtailing us. Yeah. Now people are like, dude, he's making this stuff up. No, this is how we grew up. And I don't know that it was unique to Boise or to Idaho. I know they probably weren't doing this in Detroit necessarily, but this was how we grew up. And it was the time that And this is how we interacted.
Yeah.
Like, why would I sit at home when, man, there's a whole world right outside that door, and all I got to do is go across the street to Chad's house or to Cameron's house, or just go outside. Somebody will be out there.
Yep.
And we start, hey, you want a hooky bob? Yeah, this hooky bob. Car goes by. You're like, we didn't need these phones. Now you can get caught up in the phone. And I understand depression, isolation, like all of this, when all you know is right here and you're not experiencing out there.
Yeah.
Like, life is not right here in this room. Life is not right here in my hand with this phone. There's no, God gave us bodies to go experience life. Sent us down here, put our spirit in a body, and I believe it brings him great joy to watch us water ski, or to watch us play basketball, or to watch us. Now, I think it brings him great sorrow when we misuse those bodies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But he gave us a body to go and experience the world. And I think that's why it brings him great sorrow when we wreck that body with drugs or with alcohol or with different things like that, right? But, you know, think of the greatest memories you have. Very few of them, I'm willing to bet and willing to guess, but very few of them are inside. Now, you might have Christmas memories, you might have Thanksgiving memories, you might have memories of when your child was born and all that was inside. Yeah. In Idaho, some of that might have been outside with the child being born and stuff. But, you know, like most of your greatest memories are probably outside. And it's out doing. And it's out in ways that you can't have a phone in your hand while you're doing that.
Right.
I believe these phones, for all the good that can come from them, I believe they are Satan's greatest tool in stunting the development of this generation.
You know, I could not agree more. The hooky bobbing, I bet you there's people out there who don't even know what that is.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, I want you to come back to whatever, but this one thing I was going to. So, like a few years ago, 2 winters ago, we were in our neighborhood, and I've got my 3 kids, and my oldest, who's 17 at the time.
Yeah.
I said, all right, everybody out of the truck. I stopped in the middle of the road. Everybody out of the truck. Come back to the back, and my wife's like, what are you doing? I said, just relax. It'll be okay. I didn't tell her because I knew she was going to object. And I said, okay, get down here like you're catching, and we're sitting right behind the truck, and the exhaust is coming into our face and stuff. I says, get down like you're catching and grab hold of this bumper. Okay, now when this truck starts to move, don't let go. And my daughter, who was probably 8, 9-ish at the time, to her credit, she's like, I'm out. And she went and got back. Like, she's the brains. Okay. And my wife is like, you're not doing this. You're not doing this. I said, they'll be okay. We lived, they will too, you know, type of thing. But like, I had to force them to do this, right?
Things that we naturally discovered was possible.
And
we watched
we
Back to the Future inside and thought, how can I apply that coolness
let's go
to my life?
Back to the Future.
That's right.
Outside, you know. Let me see if I can get my bicycle up to 88 miles an hour. And if we go down this hill.
Oh my goodness, the Lovelands Hill.
Yes, that's what I just thought of.
Do you remember my oldest brother?
Yeah, Eric took a nasty, like, endo tumbling down that hill.
Yes, he did. But boy, howdy, did he. At that, that was when I applied some brain cells and went, I'm out.
Yeah.
I never did it because that was freaky. You got to describe it though, because we're talking, you and I have a shared memory. We have the curse of knowledge. People listening to this, they're like, what?
Yeah, so Loveland's lived out at the south side of town.
Yeah, we were in Boise, but we were in the outskirts of Boise. Then a little bit even further.
Yeah.
Was the Lovelands.
Yeah.
Where paved roads stopped.
Yeah. Like, they would have been rednecks by definition because the directions to their house, as Jeff Foxworthy said, would have included the words, turn off the paved road. And that was how you got to the Lovelands place.
That's right.
And so along the side of their house, there was a road that went back to their neighbors. Well, the road went on back a ways and then up. And when we say up, it's not like a little knoll or a little hill or a little grassy, whatever. It was up.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it was gravel.
Yes.
And so you got a bunch of scouts out there having an overnight campfire, you know, overnight camp out and everything. And in the dark, the bright idea of, hey,
We could just
so-and-so's got their bike, but you can't ride the bike down the hill in the dark. I bet you I can. And so Eric took off down that hill, and you'd have to check with him for the true nuts and bolts behind the story. That took off down that hill, and at some point in the descent, whether it was the halfway point or the 3/4 point, that happened, and then and just
left
crash
some
and burn.
skill. He left some skin. In that level.
But again, going back to nobody wants to see their kids get hurt,
No.
right?
No.
But you learn life skills.
Yes, you
I
do.
guarantee you, Eric has not done that since, and that he's got a new perspective on certain things. That's probably not a good idea, and he can make that decision based on life experience.
And the other side of that coin, okay, so that he did that on a bike. He crashed. He experienced pain. He recovered. So now fast forward, he's home from serving a mission. He's living in St. George, Utah. And he takes my parents to a place that he says, I want to show you the type of place I want to live. He's driving a Wagoneer, I believe, all-wheel drive. And he's driving along. And as my parents describe it, he pulls off the paved road.
Okay.
And he starts driving up a hill that is not intended to be scaled. And he just drives all the way up it, knowing that worst case scenario, he's probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
That he, yes, that was probably very scary for him. And I bet he didn't ever do it on a bike again or in the dark as well. But it also let him know that, hey, when bad things happen, you can heal,
right.
You can get better. Now, you take that to an extreme, it's not good.
Right.
But I love listening to my parents tell that story because my mom was terrified. I don't know if this is true, but I think when they got up there, both of them got out of the car and refused to get back out in and said, you can just drive down on your own. We will walk. So, but that, take from a scouting outing like that, where we're experiencing life that sure, we did stupid things, but we learned from those stupid things. Sometimes the wrong lessons.
Right.
But
were they, though?
That's
you
the
say
question.
the wrong lessons, but were they? Because even like Eric's, there was no wrong lesson learned there. There was the right lesson. You learned that wasn't a smart idea. It was survival of the fittest.
Sure.
And you weeded out the people who weren't smart enough to go, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, that's true.
The kid that's like, I think I can still do that. Okay, well, death weeds you out.
That's true. So you were telling the story about hooky bobbing and and we got off on the Lovelands, but I still think we've explained what hooky bobbing is.
Well, and it's probably known by different names. I don't even know why we called it hooky bobbing, other than that it just somebody was like, hey, let's go hooky bobbing. What's that? Well, it's this. Okay, cool. That's
It's where you hook yourself to the back of the car and you bobble on.
Yeah, that's probably
the worst part. Okay, so I'll explain it. So in the wintertime in Boise, where we lived, we would get a couple of snowstorms a year. Sometimes it would cake onto the road and make the road really slick. And when that would happen, everybody would go outside and you would gather around intersections in the neighborhood, because at the intersections, as cars would come by, they would slow down because the roads are icy, and you could go around, hook onto the back of the bumper, and then you would ski essentially on the ice as the car pulled you.
Ski, or like once your legs went out from underneath you and you still had to hold that bumper, you just drag.
That's right. What happened to the back of your coat? I don't know. What do you mean? The worst though is when it would start to freeze thaw, and then you would get the little patches of asphalt
around the manhole cover.
Oh, the manhole covers
would always get, and so
and you would stop, the car would keep going.
Yep.
And down you would go. But you would then get up, dust yourself off, or brush the wet snow off and go back to an intersection to catch another car. And I remember only getting yelled at by one person.
Yeah.
And you know what? We learned that you don't grab the bumper of a nice car. You just grab the bumper of the cars that were around our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not the nice one that you're like, ooh, that's a nice one. Get out of here! Oh, he cares about his car. Okay.
Trucks are good to stick to. You know, you can't go wrong with a truck.
The Suburbans. I remember hooky bobbing on the back and having neighborhood kids come and grabbing onto the handles because they would stick out.
Yeah.
And do side surfing standing.
Oh, really? So I don't remember that part.
I tried it. Didn't work.
Yeah.
I opened the door. So I was like, I don't have that ability. But
Yeah.
something else. Do you remember doing donuts? Is like as soon as you'd have a license, whether it's at the church parking lot or the elementary school, you'd go in and you'd practice cooking or doing donuts or whatever you want to call them. I tried to get my kids. I was like, sweet, hey, let's go have some fun. Thinking I'm gonna be the cool dad. Stop! This is I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm totally in control. And I actually made several of them as soon as they were old enough to drive. Oh, that's the other thing. I don't know when you started to drive. I started to drive when I was 9 years old.
Yeah, I was, and again, right? Like different tires, what you got to know about Idaho is it's an agricultural state.
Yeah. It was
And the
legal
laws,
to have a
yes,
license
at 14.
At 14.
You know, and that was just technicality. A lot of the farm kids were driving at 9 and loading the hay and stuff like that. And, you know, a little kid goes driving down the street, maybe 10 years old. That's the Johnson kid. He's just going in the market to get parts for, let it be type of thing. And so, you know, the laws that were passed in Idaho for the longest time were like, hey, whatever, just don't impact ag. As long as it didn't, if it enables agriculture, great, you know. And so that was the beauty of the state that we grew up in. I got my license at 14, actually 15, learner's permit at 14, license at 15. But I mean, I was working for my granddad. I was driving the forklift and the backhoe at 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And dump trucks. And so, like, you know, the license was just a technicality.
I was.
When it came. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm legal now instead of illegal.
I remember getting a job at Boise Hawk Stadium. And
I remember you worked there.
yeah, that was, oh my goodness. That was,
And didn't you take out the fence with a tractor?
I did. I sure did.
Yeah.
And what the funny part of that story though, so for those who don't know the story, I'm working at a baseball stadium. I'm barely 14 years old because we're in Idaho. So of course you get a job.
Yeah.
For pay on the books legally at age 14.
Yeah.
And
one where they let you drive heavy equipment.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and so my boss, he goes, do you know how to drive a tractor? Or do you know how to start a tractor is what he asked. Well, of course I did, because I'm an Idahoan and we had a farm and I know glow plug, you push it, light comes on, you turn it. So I tell him, he's like, great, go take the tractor, load it up. And this is where the literal side of my brain gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't say I could drive it. I knew how to start it. So I go and I figure it out. I get it started and I'm messing with stuff and I figure out the bucket and all that. I go and I load it up with garbage and I'm supposed to take it behind the home run wall, right?
Yeah.
And it's painted blue. I remember it so crystal clearly in my mind because I freaked out because of what I did. I pull behind there. I dumped the garbage, the weed, all the clippings and stuff.
Yeah.
And then with the bucket out still, I turn and I start backing out and I crank the wheel and I'm going a little faster than I should for sure. And that bucket, as the tractor swings, hits the back fence and the whole thing just starts to do this wave. Freaks me out, right? And I'm just watching it and I look and I've torn up the blue paint off of and the fence was basically telephone poles with things behind it. So a big, tall telephone pole stuck in the ground and that's the thing I'd hit, damaged it. And then on the bucket of the tractor was a bunch of blue paint from the fence.
Yeah.
And I'm all like feeling awful about it. So I drive the tractor back to the wash pit and I go, and by this time I'm actually supervising college students.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense. Actually, I'm not supervising college students. All the college students who were back in school, these were the guys who couldn't go to school because they were interested in other things other than college.
Yeah.
So I tell him, I was like, hey, go to the wash pit and scrub the blue paint off of the bucket. you go to the back fence with some blue paint and paint the fence. And I go looking for my boss. He wasn't around. And when I found him, I go up to him and was like, hey, just so you know, I hit the back fence with the bucket of the tractor. And he's like, "Rah!" And just starts swearing. And, back in the day when my dad would swear when we were working on cars, I would set the light down and I would leave. I hated it when swearing would happen. And so he's just cussing and he's just swearing at me. And he goes marching towards the fence, and I go marching towards the fence with him. And he gets up there and he looks, and it's freshly painted. And he touches it and he goes, "Did you paint this?" I was like, "No, I had Joe paint it." And he's like, "Oh." And then he goes marching over to where the tractor is. It's in the wash pit. Now it's pristine because it's going to wash. Couldn't get the blue paint off. He looks at it and he's like, did you wash this? I was like, "No, I had Henry wash it." He's like, "Oh." He goes, "Okay then, don't do that again." All right. But the reason I ended up supervising is because I could drive as a 14-year-old. And we were driving. So this was the next morning after the game, pickup truck, the boss's pickup truck. We are loading it up with garbage sacks, mostly of beer, those clear cups that are full of beer, right?
Yeah.
So it's full of this trash bags are just full of it, and it's smelly and stinky. We're driving, picking them up, putting them in the back of the pickup. The guy who's driving, one of these college-age student guys, he pulls up in front of a cement-filled pipe that is supposed to be there to protect like a hydrant or something.
Yeah. They have them at gas stations too.
Yeah, exactly.
Bumper posts.
What'd you call it?
Bumper posts.
Bumper posts.
Yeah.
That's such a perfect name for it, because what happened next, I was like, "Hey, there's a thing in front of you." And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh," and he drives forward, hits it just as the boss comes around. And the boss starts yelling at him. This was before I was in charge. And he starts yelling at this college age guy, and the guy is like, "Rah," and then he turns his wrath on me and says, "And why didn't you?" I was like, "Hey, I told him." I was like, "This is not me."
Yeah.
And he looks at him and he looks at me. He goes, "Do you know how to drive?" I was like, "Yeah, I know how to drive." "What? I'm 14. Of course I know how to drive." He goes, "None of you SOPs can drive my vehicle again. You're the only one who can drive." I'm like, "Okay." And so that became my job.
Yeah.
And because I was the one driving, it naturally turned into I was the one to, "Hey, get that done." And then I would
Delegate it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up being the guy who then runs, almost knocks down the back fence and has everybody fix it. But
Yeah.
that was cool. My daughter, Rebecca, 16, she teaches, she's a tutor at some math focused place where kids come in and she teaches them math.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I don't think any of my kids have had a physically demanding job growing up. And we painted, we worked at the Hawk Stadium. I worked at the tortilla plant for a while. I mean, it was just normal to have jobs. You worked for your granddad. That was an industrial job.
Oh yeah.
I remember the first time I realized that was it Dale's?
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time I was at a gas station, I made the connection that symbol, that logo, that was the same one that was on the pickup that you would drive sometimes. I was like, "Wait a second, is that the thing?" And then find out that like half the stuff was gas related, half of it was like HVAC and heavy
Elevator.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Hobson elevator. Yeah. I don't know. I'm very appreciative of how I grew up with the opportunities that were given, and not, it wasn't silver spoon in hand opportunities, but it was opportunities to learn to work.
Yeah.
Opportunities to learn life skills. Granddad started Hobson Elevator, back, 1960-ish. Started Dale Service 1950, started Hobson Elevator sometime shortly after that. My cousins would probably get on me for not knowing the exact year. But started it because he had a friend who needed an elevator put in his house. "Hey, Dale, can you help me, Dean? Can you help me do this?" And Granddad was just that guy, right? He was just that guy that knew how to build everything, knew how to fix everything. Um, and he's, yeah, I could probably figure that out. Went over, got the elevator installed in the guy's house. And literally the thought process was, well, that wasn't that hard. I can do this professionally. Starts Hobson Elevator and to this day, even though they sold the family business 3 decades ago, you'll still find in some of the buildings around town here that are 2 or 3 story buildings, a Dover elevator with the Hobson Elevator logo in it. And that's legacy, right? When I see those, it's a flood of emotions that come back because it's like, yes, my granddad, that's everything that I grew up doing. That's my childhood. That's, to me, it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
And so, using a blowtorch at 12 years old, yeah, that's because that was how we grew up. Welding something together, yeah, sure. And so it's been tough as a parent because you look at these things that as an adult you realize, okay, that shaped me, that developed who I am. How do I recreate that for my kids?
Yeah.
Because I don't have a business for them to work in like that now.
Yeah.
So you go out and you buy a cheap Harbor Freight welder and you let them start welding in the garage and stuff. And, you put out the fire that's going in the garage before it burns the house down. And they're like, okay, let's move it out into the open. And, you buy a 1978 Ford pickup and learn how to drive a stick and can work on it, and all this kind of stuff. And so
work on it where it's not going to be so horribly misguided. Number one, they can work on it. And number two, if they mess it up,
right,
it can easily be gotten back up.
Yeah, you didn't destroy 5 other things.
That's
like,
right.
No, okay, you messed that part up. Take it out. Go get another new part and put it in.
That actually reminds me two experiences looking back. The Homers. There was a guy named Ethan. He was Gary's
Crowder.
That's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had this old Subaru, and they asked me. I was over there, and they're like, "Hey, can you help us?" I was like, "Yeah, I can hold a light," because that's what I used to do for my dad.
Yeah.
But they were trying to get the transmission back into it, and it took forever, hours on hours working on this car. And when everything was done, Ethan goes, "What's this? Oh man." They literally had to pull it back out so that they could take apart the transmission to put this ring thing back in.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that going, holy cow. And they're doing this because they kind of want to, right? It wasn't like, hey, you need to get that fixed. It was, we need a car. This car is available. We got to get the transmission working. So they went to do that. And then, so that memory is very crystallized. And then I remember a big project in your backyard when you guys put in a basketball court.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember ever thinking, it had never occurred to me that one, you could have a basketball court in your backyard.
Yeah.
And then number two, that you would just do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I just remembered the amount of work that went into it and how cool that you guys did it. It wasn't, oh, we'll general contract it out. It was, you actually did the work.
Yeah. And it wasn't, just to lay a little background there, it was, we've removed the sod, we brought in road mix, we compacted the road mix, we framed up the concrete pad, we poured it in. We had a mixer out there in the backyard.
Yeah.
And a big, but that was some of the stuff we had access to, right? We had a dump truck at work. So Dad could go get the dump truck filled with road mix and bring it home and back it into the backyard and dump all the road mix out there. And I could sit there with my shovel and bags of Portland concrete and spoon, feed that stuff into the mixer and get the blend right and then bring it over in a wheelbarrow and dump it out. And Dad would trowel it out and we poured it in these 5 different sections to where we had this basketball court out there.
Yeah.
And it was, there's some of those skills that I acquired just through naturally growing up. I feel guilty because when was the last time I framed up a concrete pad? Decades, but I still know how to do it. Why don't my kids know how to do it?
And so to bring it back to the phone. So for me, that exposed me to the possibility of doing things for oneself, right?
Yeah.
You can fix a car. You can pour your own basketball court if you want. If you want to do it, you can. There's no one who's going to tell you no. Nowadays, that's not necessarily as true because they have all these regulations, and you probably would have an HOA who would have a fit about having a dump truck could pull into your backyard. But with YouTube, and now if I need to fix something, like I have fixed the washer and dryer so many times, just because YouTube was like, I'd be like, what's this noise? And it would then say, some guy's like, if you're experiencing this noise, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is my make and model. If you happen to have this make and model, it was wonderful, and I'd fix it. And thank goodness this last year, the last time it broke, actually on Amazon, it tells you how many times you've ordered the same product. The last time. I was like, wait a second, that was only 3 months ago. It's now, there's something else going on that is making this part wear out. So we replaced it. But all my kids grew up with, hey guys, we're not going to have laundry services for a couple days because I have to fix it and I don't have time.
Yeah.
And then they'd come down and everything's sprawled apart. And that, the knowledge that you can do something for yourself, that's still available if you're exposed to it. So YouTube is the how, but I think there's some real value in making the attempt yourself when things are not life on the line type of stuff. And one of the favorite stories that I tell is my wife, when we were first married, we had a 1985 Buick Park Avenue. It had come from my grandpa, who had passed away, gone to my parents, and then we had gotten it, and it needed the brakes replaced.
Yeah.
Well, I knew from experience that brakes can be replaced by you.
Yes.
So by the way, I remember, did you have like a Pontiac that had the steering wheel had like 1,000 buttons on it? Is that a real memory?
Yeah. Mom and Dad had a Pontiac Bonneville that was the SE package. And so it had some spoiler trims on the front and on the rear. And it was probably a 6-cylinder engine, but it could actually get up and move. I mean, it wasn't probably going to be a Corvette or anything, but it was a peppy little car. And yeah, I had, this was probably in 1990-ish, 89-ish. So the idea, it had all these steering wheel buttons and stuff. Yeah. It was like, that was out there. That was a hit from Knight Rider at that point.
It was. Anyway, so it's hot, so I'm going to use my parents' garage. Plus my dad had tools, right? I was still young in my marriage, and I hadn't acquired all the tools that I have now. So I'm over there and I'm working on the brakes. Back then, this is pre-internet for me. I went to the library, checked out a book, and I read the book, and then I was going to go do it. And my wife comes I remember I'm underneath the car working on the caliper, and she comes out and she goes, hey, do you want my dad to come over and help? I was like, oh, please, no. Nothing against Steve. Sure. But I don't need a supervisor. I am figuring this out. Well, in her defense, this is kind of a life or death thing to get wrong. You want your brakes to work, but I'm working on it. Next thing I know, her dad shows up, and I'm like, what the? Turns out she had called him before she asked me and said, Dad, I'm just really nervous. Cameron's working on the brakes of our car. And so he came over to help, and she asked me, hoping that I'd be like grateful for the help, and didn't know what to do. And I said, no, I don't want any help. So anyway, got through that, and the brakes worked great.
Yeah.
And, nowadays, there's things that people are always like, you have, hey, if you open this up, it's going to void your warranty on electronics, but I open things up, and I have soldering irons, and I like to tinker, and I set up in the living room when I'm tinkering.
Yeah.
I have a nice place out in the side yard, but if I impact the kids, if I do it in front of them and they come in, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm replacing this capacitor that
exploded. Fluxing anymore.
That's right. Nice reference.
Yeah. Actually.
So I like to do things in front of them. And so we have an Oculus, and it had a overheating issue. Well, what in our society, most people would like be, oh, take it in. And I'm like, well, hey, let's fix it. So watch a YouTube video on how to fix it, get my tools, and I have all the tools, which is a good excuse. Hey, I'm teaching my kids, I got to get more tools. And I take it apart, get the fan out. This is the problem. So let's order the part, and then we fix the Oculus. And I do that in front of them, even though it's inconvenient. It's easier to do it without anybody around, and it's easier to do it by myself. But I have them participate. And I look at my dad, who used to have me hold that flashlight until he started cussing, and then I'd set it down and be
Yeah.
But I wonder if it was annoying to him to have me sitting there and nonsensical words, not able to communicate very well when I'm 5, 6, 7 years old. And, he's working on it and it's constantly drifting. And if he would just be able to have it magnetized and hooked on and just like have someone holding it,
Right.
it would make his life better. But I wonder how much of my, hey, I'm going to try that, came from that exposure of holding him and watching him do it.
Probably a lot of it. Well, probably, look, if done right, if the family environment's right, you always look up to your parents, you look up to your dad, you look up to your granddad, whatever. And so you want to be like that. Well, this is something granddad could do. This is something dad could do. So by golly, I'm going to figure out how to do it, or I should be able to do this. And there's a lot of that that's driven me in my life. It's like, hey, every Hobson on record can probably do this. So if I don't pull this off, and I'm tiny compared to the rest of them. So we're going to figure this out, type of thing. So I think, but the reality is, to your dad's credit, and to every dad's credit who does that, yeah, it would be easier to just and put that up there on a magnet. But it's like, okay, let me get my kid out here on my hip so that they learn some life lessons and stuff. I think challenge with the youth these days, challenge with the younger generation, like with the world, with the community, is all stems from the home environment. And I think that there's so many non-traditional home environments anymore. And look, stuff happens.
Yeah.
People go through divorce. My hat's off to any single mom who's raising those kids and holding down a full-time job. I think that's the most impressive thing out there. I've watched them go through that. And I'm I have to take care of my kids for 2 or 3 days and do full-time work. And it's like, I want to just, scream.
Yeah.
So I don't get that capacity. That's amazing.
Sure.
That said, the ideal situation, having both a mom and a dad in the home where they can raise the kids and you can learn mom things, nurturing things, whatever from mom, and dad things, man things from dad. When that's disrupted, I think that you get a lot of stuff that just doesn't get transferred down to the kids and downloaded to the kids and programmed to the kids. That it's not that they can't recover from that. It's not that they can't overcome it. It just makes it different, makes it harder.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a guy who could not repair anything to save his life. Basement started flooding at his house. He had no idea to turn the water off.
Oh.
And so he said, well, call the guy and tell him it's kind of emergency and they need to get out there quick. And meanwhile, the water was just pouring in.
Yeah.
Like, dude, stop what you're doing and go figure that part out.
Right.
Because, but like he never had that example growing up of someone in the household who could figure that out. And I don't care if it's the dad or the mom,
Right.
but somebody's got to model that for the kid. I worry about this generation and their mental health challenges, and they're real, and I don't mean to downgrade those. Mm-hmm. You've experienced it. I personally have dealt with anxiety a little bit as an adult, and then first time I came across that, I was like, well, that's weird.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm telling a buddy about it, and he laughs. He goes, you got anxiety. You got to go see a doctor. I said, no, I don't have anxiety. And he says, that's anxiety. You go see a doctor, get on some pills until you can sort that crap out. And, but you look at a whole generation there's a constant struggle with that. And you look, okay, you say, what's different? Why are they all struggling with this and very few aren't, versus our generation where a few did and most did not?
Right.
I really believe it's the things that we've talked about today. And like, how'd you grow up? We were out doing things. We were out exploring things. We were out putting ourselves out there so that when we got to the adult phase in life and had to deliver for the family or had to, accomplish or whatever, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do, like my phone won't work to fix the car. Like I can't, fix it that way by setting my phone on it. It's like, no, we survived growing up.
We did.
Eric survived windowing down the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Okay, life, what are you going to throw at me?
Yeah.
That's any worse than that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there are a few things worse than that. Okay, but, I've got the foundation to tackle those things.
Yeah. I think this is actually a great place for us to wrap up, because what you're talking about is that play has value. Play teaches people how to overcome.
Yeah.
And with being outside for play, and we're not talking about playing video games, right?
Right.
We're talking about physical play, whether that's hooky bobbing, playing basketball, wiffle ball, just jumping on the trampoline at the Porters, do whatever it is, being active and playing and not isolated. I think that play is what gives you some resilience, because if play is done right, there's low risk of death, high risk of injury.
Right.
So I think that might be the title of this one is, hey, play done right, high risk or low risk of death, high risk of injury.
We, the guy that was the scoutmaster in our ward forever, his motto was, Boy Scouts, we do dangerous things safely, basically.
That's awesome.
And it was like, hey, there's not a challenge out there we're not going to try and tackle, but for the moms out there, we'll make it as safe as possible. But yeah, I think being out and about and interacting with the components of life, right? And that's problem solving at its core. It's a very caveman structure of it, but it's problem solving. It's, oh man, I don't have the strength to ride my bike up this hill. What am I going to do? Well, I guess I better keep trying it. Or I guess I better, go ride up other hills that are in you naturally evolve and adapt as a kid to where you can, and you take that same mentality out and about. We play basketball all the time. Well, you were the tallest kid that we were playing with. And so it's like, okay, I can't do a layup down the middle with Cameron there because he's freaking the Jolly Green Giant. So how am I going to, okay, so I'm going to adapt.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have to be quicker, or I'm going to have to set up a play where like it draws Cameron one way and it opens the backdoor lane for a layup, or, how am I going to rebound with this Goliath around? Okay, well, I'm going to have to use my body to box out and stuff. Yeah. But like, if you're not doing that in your formative years, and then you get into your adult years and life expects you to be able to execute that way and think that way, yeah, no wonder you got a bunch of, I don't want to be disrespectful, but no wonder you got a whole society struggling with anxiety because they're not equipped for it anymore.
Yeah. And COVID is going to be an ongoing theme of the damage that was done.
Yeah.
And
but it was, I think it was an accelerant. I don't think it was a root cause. Okay. I think we had a fire started by the iPhone generation and it was burning pretty good. And then you throw COVID on there and it's an accelerant. And it just, but I think you could go back and look at data, and I've heard psychologists talk about this and stuff. The trend was there. The isolationism, the mental illnesses were there, all tied to the launch of the smartphone. And I like my phone as much as anybody.
Right.
But it was a society changer in terms of all that. Then you throw in the isolationism of COVID and all the little kids being told all the time, hey, mask up or you're going to die. You got to put that mask on or you're going to die. You don't want to get sick and die like everybody else. My daughter at 10 years old got some serious anxieties. And if the topic of health or death comes up, she almost goes in a corner and no, because it's like, shit, wigs are out.
Yeah.
Okay, I place that right on the shoulders of what y'all went through COVID.
Yeah.
And hey, got to wear your mask. And I don't mean to make this a whole master good, master bad. Like, hey, to each their own, right?
Yeah.
Like, for your family, that might have been the right solution. For my family, ours might have been the right. Like, you got to do what's right for you and yours.
Yeah.
But within the school system and society, like, look at the messaging that we sent the kids at that age.
Yeah.
It was clearly, whether intended or not, it was clearly, you better wear a mask or you're going to get sick and you're going to die.
You're going to die from something unseen, and you're going to wear this thing that makes you uncomfortable and makes it almost worthwhile to die. I have a very morbid sense of humor. My kids who've dealt with depression and anxiety have a morbid sense of humor. And this is something that we joke around about, and I apologize to those who are sensitive. But, the saying that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
We changed it to if it doesn't kill you, it probably makes you want to die. So that's,
Yeah.
But going through that, where this unseen thing, non-tangible, it wasn't something you could attack, but it was this weird, almost like a ritual of, put this mask on and magically you're going to be okay. If you don't put the mask on, you're going to get sick, or worse, you're going to kill others.
Yeah.
That's a very weird.
That's a psychological screw job.
The kids.
Yeah.
And even if that wasn't the intent, I remember thinking, I'll isolate for 14 days to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
And then, 2 years go by of the weirdness of that. We are going to be recovering from that for decades. I do think there's a change happening. I think awareness, in the same way that, hey, don't do drugs, the Nancy Reagan say no to drugs that we were growing up. So that kind of caught on. People stopped. Drug addiction, experimentation is down. Cigarette smoking in high school is down. Then it became sex. The fact that Brian was on MTV still boggles my mind today.
I don't know this story. Not totally reset us back to, a new hour, but I didn't know that Brian was on MTV.
Okay. So do you remember the walkouts at Meridian because of sex ed?
Vaguely. Now that you're saying this, vaguely. I remember a whole week worth of bomb threats where every day there was a bomb threat and we had to evacuate the building. So those are the ones I remember. They go, oh, cool, another bomb threat. I don't have to go to science class
today.
Again. Yeah.
So, the saying back, so Brian was 2 years older than me. He was a year older than you.
To the day. His birthday's the same day as mine.
Is it really?
April 11th.
Well, happy birthday next month.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
And to Brian.
That's right. So the idea was, they started teaching sex ed, but Meridian went through this little bit of period where the teachers, trying to do good things from their perspectives, forgot that the parents are in charge of their kids, right? And so the teachers would get kind of in trouble, and so they kind of did a little whiplash, and the students did a walkout, and some of them went down to the Planned Parenthood equivalent back then, and got like 5-gallon buckets of condoms, and were passing them out for all of this thing. And the big push was, hey, we want education on this, because the saying used to be, when Brian was a sophomore, was we came as children and left as parents. There were so many kids attending Meridian High School as pregnant women.
Yeah.
Because there was a big push to, hey, let's not isolate them. Let's have them keep going to school. And then, Sally gets all the attention from being preggo, and all of her friends all of a sudden become preggo.
Yeah.
It became an issue where Meridian High School, west of the Mississippi, had the largest per capita pregnancy rate of any high school. Okay.
See, I didn't know that, but I do remember a lot of pregnant women, a lot of pregnant girls in high school.
Yeah.
Like a lot. Like that was, people say, how big was your graduating class? So, well, we were about 450, but I think only about 390 of us walked, because between X, Y, and Z, and pregnancy was one of the variables there.
So it was a thing. So MTV, they had a walkout to say, no, we want to be educated about sex. And MTV came in, they did a little thing, and the song was, let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah.
Right. And so the clip of my brother got in there because he's wearing his Letterman jacket, and they're like, well, let's talk about the other side. And Brian's there is like, hey, if you want to talk about sex ed, that's fine. I'm going to be abstinent, so I don't need it.
Yeah.
That's his clip.
Yeah.
But it's on MTV back in the day,
Huh,
back
good.
when they used to play music.
Good for
videos.
Brian.
Yeah. So that was the story, and it was bizarre.
Yeah.
But that's how we grew up, is when in a farming community, high school, where people...
Which Meridian definitely was at the time. Anybody living here now wouldn't realize that, no, Meridian was out on the boondocks.
That's right.
In the sticks, and you'd go across the street from the school and go pheasant hunting after school.
right.
And don't kid yourself. There's a lot of kids that had shotguns behind the seat of their truck.
Or just wanted.
Yeah.
It was not weird. And I remember a couple days coming in, and someone was showing off their dove thing by lining it up along the bed of the pickup.
Yeah.
And they had gotten their quota before school.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
not a huge deal.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we digress again. But Casey, I have to tell you, I can't believe I looked at your watch and I went, what?
Oh, I hadn't even looked at it.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been so fun talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a hoot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if you have anything else to say, now's the time. I'll edit it cleanly at the end.
Atlanta Braves, 2025 World Series champions. You heard it here first.
Nice.
That's the message I would have delivered in high school. That's been